What's up, vegans and future vegans? It's Lou Miles Walker with a video about gain stacking, crafting an electric guitar tone. Also, overdrive versus distortion. So the first thing I want to talk about is, where what's the background for what's the context for good guitar sounds, and specifically I want to talk about more of a bluesy tone, a cleaner, more subtle type of tone. So, we first started hearing overdrive, which is mild distortion, naturally just from tube amps and turning up tube amps. You turn up, you might know that if you turn up a tube amp, you're going to hear some mild distortion. Sometimes more than mild, even heavy distortion in some cases, depending on the amp and how it's designed and how it performs, the kind of tubes you're using, whether or not it's been modified. I think, some of the best music and the heaviest in terms of impact, on the listener, not necessarily in terms of like the amount of distortion or how much it sounds like heavy metal, but the impact on the listener is actually not that distorted a lot of the time. It does get pretty raunchy at some points, but there's a build up to that, and that's what I'm going for. And I use techniques to try and pace myself as an improvisationalist. Someone who likes to take long solos. I like jam bands, Hendrix. So there's a range, of distortion. Let's say you're going from, let's say, I don't know, the heaviest lead guitar tone that, say, Kirk Hammett uses could be 100%, and then a clean tone would be 1% or 0% distortion. There's a whole range in there, and I feel like with the gain stacking, you can access that entire range, and you can cultivate dynamic playing that uses that entire range. So I would say that overdrive is mild distortion. Overdrive is when you've got one stage that's starting to push on another stage in your, you've got, let's say you've got pedals, you've got an amp, within the amp you've got a preamp, you've got these stages where you're boosting your guitar signal. If a stage in front of another stage is at a higher level than the next stage can take, that's called overdrive, and it can be a very cool sound, a very nice sound. It will bring out certain aspects of your guitar tone and your playing. Now, when you really start to push one stage from a previous stage, and you can get what's called hard clipping, you can get into a distortion area, and that's what distortion pedals do. There's a few stages in there, and you could say they're designed aggressively to get a distorted tone, and that can be great. The problem with distortion pedals is that a lot of times, if you try to access the lower range of distortion, they're just too noisy. Like if you turn down the volume on your guitar, turn down the distortion knob, you can get a milder less distorted tone, but it starts getting noisy. It just doesn't work well like with the rest of the rig. So you know, I would compare overdrive with like a Fender amp that's on maybe 5 or 6. You just start to hear that the tone is changing. Start to sound a little hairy, gritty, and that's like an overdrive sound. A distortion sound would be like if you had, you know, like a Marshall head that's turned all the way up, that has like really aggressive tubes in it, gainy tubes in it, and you can, start to get a very distorted sound out of that. Another way to get that distorted sound is to use, a distortion pedal. I mean, these pedals are designed. A lot of these distortion pedals are, they're designed for young, inexperienced players who go in and try a pedal at the store and step on it, and they hear a change. Suddenly, it sounds really grungy, and it sounds like Metallica to them, and they're like, "Oh, this is the one I want," but they're missing something. And there's an excitement that you experience as a player, I think, and a listener when you try and seek more subtlety in your use of gain and overdrive. And what'll happen is let's say you'll turn up the volume on the guitar, and you'll start to hear it bite. You'll start to hear it get a little raunchy, and that will excite you as a player. The audience will start to get excited because they'll hear that you're moving in a more raunchy or heavier direction. And then maybe you kick in a pedal, or you kick in the channel, you hit the channel switching switch on your amp, and suddenly you're boosted up into a higher level of overdrive, and so on and so forth, and you can build up to this crescendo of like a heavy rock tone, or even getting into a like a heavy metal type of tone. I mean, there were certain songs where Hendrix really almost got into like a heavy metal type of territory, and that I prefer to sort of stay in that range as a player, between clean or slightly overdriven all the way to like a heavy rock that borders on a heavy metal tone. But typically I don't like to play like heavy metal rhythms. It's just not my preference. I do listen to Metallica and punk rock, not a lot, not frequently, not often, but I do listen to it. So gain stacking, like the way, and I don't see a lot of people talking about this on YouTube, and I've looked around a little bit, and I mean, people are just using too much distortion. I mean, in my opinion, it's just not tasteful, the way it's done a lot of the time. But I understand why people do it, because they feel like the average listener maybe can't hear subtle overdrive. I disagree. I mean, I think YouTube producers are underestimating the ears of the masses. And I feel like as a player, you're in a way you're educating the masses, and you got to help them develop their ears. And part of the way you do that is through using subtlety, as a player, and as basically as an engineer, as an audio engineer. I mean, when you're the way you use pedals, I mean, a good guitar player is an audio engineer when it comes to how they use their pedals. I mean, Hendrix was, for sure, in my opinion. So the way I like to gain stack is either get low gain overdrive pedals or modify overdrive pedals to get the gain down, and to be able to have them in a low gain neighborhood but without too much noise, because that's the problem you can get into. Either there'll be too much noise or there won't be enough volume when you turn the gain all the way down. And instead of having one distortion pedal and one kind of gainy overdrive pedal, you use like 3 or 4 overdrive devices, one or two of which are real tube devices, so you can get that authentic, nice, smooth type of overdrive, and then have one actual like distortion pedal, and then and have that distortion pedal like turned down. And so if you want to get a heavy rock sound, just turn on all the pedals or all but like 1 or 2 of them. But the great thing about having like, and this is where I'm getting into the gain stacking thing. The great thing about, gain stacking is you can have 2 or 3 overdrive pedals on a lot of the time, and you can play really dynamically just using the volume on your guitar. And I mean, like with a Stratocaster, the volume's right there, and you can manipulate the volume while you're playing, and you can just develop this really dynamic playing style where you're going from clean bell-like tones to slightly gritty tones to raunchy tones, and back and forth and back and forth, and you can just make these really just complex, interesting, kind of emotional statements. And you get this amazing sort of cascading effect to where if you got like 2 or 3 overdrive pedals on, you've just got it all right there, and you can go, I mean, within just a couple clicks of volume, you can go from just slightly overdriven into like a raunchy, just dirty blues. And that is a wonderful thing. I'll make a video hopefully soon where I'm actually demoing this, with the pedals. But I think it's useful to have a video where I just talk about it, and I don't get into specifics of gear. But typically I found that pedals that have real tubes in them, you can usually use as low gain overdrive pedals. Tube drivers like the Ibanez classic tube driver and those clones, Boss SD1, can be modified by just changing one resistor to low gain. Those are great low gain devices for gain stacking. Another example would be the Danelectro Daddio pedal. It's not the greatest, but it does work. I mean, you can get it into a low gain neighborhood, and now you've got these pedals out there, like the Spark. You've got like the Crab, like the Blues Crab. All these pedals that like have glass in the name, or you can use like clean boost pedals. If you have there's like a clean boost pedal that has a gain volume or like a gain knob, that very well could be a good low gain overdrive device. You can also I put volume pedals into the effects chain, so I can like dial back, because if you put volume in front of gain, it controls the gain, so I can like dial back the gain. I mean, the more control you have, the more precise you can be, and the more you can access that entire range of distortion from, like I was talking about, 0 to 100. But you really have to try it. You got to play with it, experiment. I mean, another thing I've noticed is that your tone knob on your guitar just it makes such a difference. I mean, it's so useful. It's all you can get a much more distorted sound a lot of times just by turning up the tone. So you got to play with both the tone and volume, and with different pedals. Change the order of your pedals. You got to experiment. The different pedals have different input and output impedances, which will change the tone. So they act like, you're basically creating high and low pass filters of sorts by how you arrange your pedals. There's just really a lot there, and you just don't, you just can't get the same sounds with like a cheap distortion pedal. It just doesn't work the same. And there are some great devices out there that have like two switches, so that it's an overdrive pedal, but it's got a boost, or it's got like a clean boost and overdrive in the same pedal. That is what I'm talking about. I don't have one of those right now, but I'm definitely looking at them, and those can be very useful. So I think it's one. It's called like the Cacti or the Cactus. That thing looks epic. Like you could have hours of fun with that thing. So yeah, distortion, overdrive, mild overdrive. Overdrive it's such an important part of lead guitar for me, and I think for a lot of people. The blues tone is where it's at. Less is more. Subtle overdrive. I think it's better to work with subtle and medium overdrive a lot of the time. And then as you become a better player and you're getting louder, maybe working with the drummer, that's when I sort of get inspired to head more into like a heavy rock territory. But then again, you can use heavy distorted tones, just like if you're playing with another guitar player on acoustic. I mean, it just all depends, but I think like less is more, and better to be tasty and err to the side of a cleaner guitar tone versus like the problem with heavy distortion tones is that you start to just lose the tone of the guitar. You start to just hear compression, and you don't hear the sound of the guitar and the pickups, and you're playing. So the great thing about being able to utilize the appropriate amount of overdrive is that you're making the emotional statement that you want to make, and you're still able to hear your technique and the sound of your guitar. So it's a balanced approach. It's a holistic approach to using overdrive, and so I definitely recommend stacking, using multiple low gain overdrive devices, preferably one of them using real tubes, having in addition to the preamp tubes in your real tube amp, if you're lucky enough, or if you make the point of getting one, that you have also another tube driver that uses real tubes, which just does wonders for your tone. Sometimes depends what you're doing. I mean, sometimes depending on what I'm doing, I don't like the extra tube driver. It sounds too bright. So it just all depends what you're doing, where you are in the song, what song it is, etc. So anyway, that's all I got on that. It's a Lou Miles Walker. Free all animals. Animality is the new humanity. Animals are people too. Animal rights consciousness. Go vegan, go plant-based, for your health, the environment, and for your karma. All right, like and subscribe. I'll see you later.